Kate was loud, violent, annoying, and terrifying. She slapped children, poisoned a man, and no one could stop her because Kate wasn't even alive. Hello there, my spooky little goblins. I'm Kelly, and this is Eerie Eats, where creepy stories and yummy recipes come together like a dinner date with the dead. So if you like cooking while listening to true, weird, and spooky stories, this channel is totally for you. Do the dead even date in the afterlife? I really hope not. That is way too much drama. Tonight's story takes us deep into Tennessee folklore, where whispers turned into voices and ghosts made sure that everyone knew their name. What do you get when you mix Southern charm with a ghost who wouldn't shut up? The Bell Witch. And that is exactly what we're talking about tonight. One of the most chilling hauntings in the South. And while we get into all that ghostly goodness, I'm going to be making up good old-fashioned apple pie. Let's dive in.
Let's rewind to long before any of the hauntings started, before the whispers and the knocks and the ghostly threats. John Bell was born in 1750 in Edgecombe County, North Carolina, to William and Ann Bell. In his early years, he trained as a barrel maker before transitioning into farming, which was eventually what would become the foundation of his wealth and standing. In the same county, a girl named Lucy Williams was born around 1770 to a man named John Williams Jr. Her mom's name was never recorded, which unfortunately wasn't unusual for the time. Now, here's something that gets a little unsettling by today's standards. Lucy and John met when she was only 12 years old. He was 32. Yeah. And they got married in 1782. And while that kind of age gap was kind of disturbingly fairly common back then, it definitely makes you cringe now. So anyway, together, Lucy and John built a life of what seemed like an ideal life. They had land, influence, and growing family. By 1804, they had 6 children: Jesse Egbert, John Jr., Drury, Esther, and Zadok, and an infant named Benjamin, who unfortunately passed away very young. But the Bells, they wanted more fertile soil and better farming opportunities, so they packed up and made roughly 650-mile trek to Tennessee. And that journey couldn't have been easy, through wilderness, hills, and rough trails in like a stagecoach or some sort of horse-drawn carriage. But they made it. They ended up settling in Red River, which is now Adams, Tennessee. They purchased over 300 acres of rich farmland, and John ended up becoming a very prominent local figure like he was back in North Carolina. Lucy was known for her kindness and deep faith. Eventually, they would have 9 children in total. For a while, things were really good. They were perfect. They were successful planters, well respected, deeply involved in the church and in community life. But underneath that picture-perfect surface, something was brewing. It all started in 1817 with something strange in the cornfield. John Bell saw what he thought was a dog until it got really close, and then this creature had a body of a dog, but the head of a rabbit. Weird, unnatural, and disturbing. He raised his rifle and he fired, but the thing vanished into the woods without a trace, like it wasn't even there. At first it was kind of easy to shrug off as a weird animal, whatever. I live in Florida, so there are a lot of weird things that go on here, so I totally get it. Maybe he thought it was a trick of the eye, but then came sounds. There were sounds outside the house, there were sounds of knocking on the inside of the house, slow, measured as if someone was, or something, was deliberately announcing itself. Then came scratches from inside the wall, sounds like rats chewing on wood, and then the tugging on blankets, breathing in empty rooms, and whispers that sounded like words, but not quite. The family tried to rationalize. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it was animals that got into the attic, maybe it was the house settling. The sounds never stopped. They got louder and closer and smarter. It didn't take long before the whispers began to form actual words. At first, they were fragments of Bible verses, and then entire sermons, quoted word for word. Hymns, too, even gossip from neighbors. The voice seemed to know everything and everyone, and it wasn't shy about showing off. John searched the property again and again and again, and there was no tracks, no signs of any type of intruder whatsoever. Just the voice and the fear it left behind. Word got out. Curious neighbors and ministers came to the Bell home to see if any of the rumors were true. They didn't leave disappointed for sure. The spirit mocked ministers by repeating their sermons back to them. It called guests by name and recited conversations that were held in different rooms. Eventually, the voice introduced itself. It said,
"I'm Kate."
That's when the Bell family realized that this was more than just strange noises. They were living with a ghost. A loud one. A smart one. And one that wasn't going anywhere. The spirit didn't terrorize the whole house. It locked in on one person in particular, and that was Betsy Bell. Betsy was 12 years old when this strange activity began, and at first it seemed like childish mischief. Her hair was pulled in the middle of the night, her bed covers were yanked away, and she felt cold hands grab her ankles when no one was there. But it escalated really fast. She began waking up with fresh scratches on her arms and legs. Red welts appeared across her back as if she had been whipped. Once her entire braid was ripped from her head in front of her mother. The spirit whispered to her constantly, mocking, threatening, sometimes weeping, and sometimes laughing. It left Betsy exhausted, shaken, and unable to sleep. Her family tried to comfort her, but they were just as terrified. The neighbors and the community all noticed. They started talking. Ministers visited and prayed over her, only to be mocked by the disembodied voice once again. Even the teachers at Betsy's school commented on her sudden change in appearance and demeanor. She went from a bright and lively child to a pale and withdrawn and frightened little girl. And things only got worse when Betsy got engaged to a local boy named Joshua Gardner. The spirit hated him, hated the engagement, hated everything about it. And every night the attacks grew more and more violent. The voice screamed at her to stop the marriage. It followed her to school, to church, to visits with friends. Betsy couldn't escape it at all. Eventually, under unbearable pressure, she ended the engagement to Joshua. And just like that, the spirit calmed down. Not gone, but quieter, like it had gotten what it wanted. Now, with Betsy no longer the focus, the spirit turned its fury to John Bell himself. And this time, it wasn't just whispers and scratches. John began suffering from strange, debilitating symptoms. His tongue would swell without warning, his jaw would clench and lock, and sometimes for hours. He experienced frequent tremors and spells of confusion and unexplainable fatigue. There were days that he couldn't even walk without stumbling or speak clearly. Some nights, he couldn't speak at all. His family did everything that they could. Lucy tried herbal medicines and poultices. The children took turns watching over him. They brought him to the doctors and nothing helped. No one could explain what was happening. Every effort failed, and through it all, the voice never stopped. It said,
"I'll get him. I'll kill John Bell."
The spirit mocked him constantly, especially when he was at his weakest. That's what they usually do, kick you when you're down. It would laugh when he collapsed, recite his prayers back to him in twisted tones, and sometimes it sounded very happy, eerily happy. In the late 1820s, John Bell was barely able to leave his bed. He grew thin, pale, withdrawn. His family kept a close watch, and desperate and afraid. Then, on the morning of December 19th, 1820, they found John unresponsive. His usual medicine was a liquid that he took every day, but they couldn't find it. It was gone. But in its place was a strange, dark vial that no one in the house recognized. And then that's when they heard the voice say,
"It was me. I gave him that."
The family tested the contents on their cat, and the cat died instantly. I do not agree with that. That is not fair. I am a cat lover, and that right there is grounds for termination. I don't like that at all. I don't like that they did that. But this is the 1800s, so John Bell, the next day. No one ever determined what was in the vial. No autopsy was performed. And his cause of death was officially listed as unknown. But according to the family and the legend, he was the only man in U.S. history that was killed by a ghost. Or the story goes. After John Bell's death, the spirit didn't just disappear. For weeks, the voice continued, laughing, mocking the family, even interrupting John's funeral. It repeated prayers in sinister tones. It ridiculed the mourners. It sang hymns at the wrong times. And the Bells were terrified and unable to find any kind of peace. But gradually, the activity lessened and the knocks grew fainter. The voice became more distant, and by the spring of 1821, the haunting had all but stopped. Then one night, the spirit made a strange promise.
"I'll return in 7 years."
And just like that, it was gone. Now, in 1828, exactly 7 years later, John Bell Jr. claimed that the spirit came back. He said the return was nothing like the first round. There were no attacks, no violence. Instead, he reported having long conversations with the entity about life and death, morality, spirituality, and even the future of mankind. I would love to have a conversation with the dead about that kind of stuff. It'd be so interesting. Anyway, it wasn't angry or chaotic. It was thoughtful and eerily calm. And then, after a short time, the voice vanished again. No dramatic exit, no curse, just silence. And whether or not that return actually happened, we really don't know. But the story didn't end there. After the years, the legend grew and evolved. It inspired books, plays, documentaries, and several horror films. The most famous modern adaptation, the Blair Witch Project, which I saw, and that is a funny story. I really thought that my house was haunted, and I would not go down in the basement for a year without my dog because of that movie. But that's okay. That is a story for another time. Anyway, and yes, there is even the Bell Witch Cave that you can still visit in Adams, Tennessee, near the original Bell family property. Some say it's still haunted, others say it's just a really clever tourist attraction. But whether you believe in the haunting or not, one thing is for sure. the Bell Witch became a permanent part of American folklore, and she really hasn't left. You know, we call the Bell Witch a witch, but she wasn't really a witch at all. It was a spirit, come to be known as the Bell Witch. It was a ghost, or some sort of entity. But that title didn't come out of thin air. It came from the entity itself. At some point during the haunting, the disembodied voice, like I said, identified itself as Kate. Just Kate. And that was enough for the community to make a leap. See, there was a woman there named Kate Batts. And Kate Batts, she was a real woman who lived near the Bells. She was known for being totally outspoken, sharp-tongued, a bit eccentric, and she didn't always get along with her neighbors. And in the early 1800s, that was all it took to get labeled as a witch, as we learned in one of my last videos. She was also widowed, involved in land dealings, and wasn't afraid to challenge men publicly. That was another strike against the eyes of the society at that time. There were rumors that she had a grudge against John Bell over a business deal or a land dispute, which only fueled the gossip. But here's the thing. There's no solid documentation that Kate Batts ever had an actual feud with John Bell. No court records, no letters, no church notes, nothing to back it up. And as far as being a witch, there's no evidence that she practiced any form of witchcraft at all. It seems likely that once the spirit claimed to be Kate, the townspeople, already suspicious of her, connected the dots in the most dramatic way. Over time, the name stuck. So the Bell Witch wasn't called that because the spirit acted like a witch. She was called that because the people around her already had a name and a scapegoat ready to go. And nearly everything we know about the Bell Witch comes from one single source, a book called The Authenticated History of the Bell Witch, written by Martin Van Buren Ingram in 1894, over 70 years after the events supposedly took place. Ingram wasn't a historian, he was a newspaper editor. And while he claimed his book was based on a manuscript called Our Family Trouble that was written by Richard Bell, John Bell's son, no one ever produced a verified copy of that manuscript. In fact, no one outside of Ingram ever claimed to have seen it. Despite that, Ingram's book became the definitive version of the Bell Witch legend. It painted a vivid, dramatic picture of the events, full of eerie details, escalating paranormal attacks, and because there wasn't other written accounts to contradict it, his version stuck. But here's another thing. None of the events described in Ingram's book appear in any known contemporary records. No court documents, no church minutes, no diaries or letters from neighbors or pastors. Even the infamous cat test and the claim that the ghost poisoned John Bell, all these stories come directly from Ingram, not from any first-hand source. So what we're left with is basically a 19th century colorful, compelling legend that may have started with a grain of truth, but got bigger, stranger, and spookier with every retelling, which makes this more of a 19th century telephone game than a verified haunting. So here's something that actually did happen. It's not ghostly, but it is certainly suspicious. In 1816, John Bell was accused of usury, which basically means charging excessive or illegal interest on a loan. And that sounds like every single bank today, by the way. The accusation came from a man named Benjamin Batts, the brother-in-law of, you guessed it, Kate Batts. Bell denied it. He said it wasn't a loan at all. It was a transaction involving the purchase of an enslaved girl for $100. Later, Bats claimed that she was worth a lot more and wanted to resell her. So Bell told him, fine, if you're going to do that, then you owe me $150. Bats came back later with another man and offered him $120. Bell accepted the deal and even burned the original bill of sale to finalize it. End of story, right? Well, not quite. At first, the local church sided with Bell. Bats took the matter to court, and Bell was found guilty of usury. That conviction was a serious blow, especially because Bell was a church elder. So the church reopened the case. Even though they had already cleared him, they charged him again, and this time they excommunicated him. And that meant total social and spiritual isolation. He was cut off from his religious community and disgraced in the eyes of his neighbors. And it gets a little weirder. The church didn't just charge him with usury. Out of nowhere, they added a second charge, contempt. The specifics? Bell had allegedly spoke against the church, questioned its decisions, and then threatened to leave. I hear the beep of the apple pie. No hearings were held beforehand, no real evidence presented, and these new accusations just appeared. And yet, despite the timing, none of this is mentioned in the ghost story. Church records make no mention of the supernatural activity, not even a whisper. And early tellings of the Bell Witch legend never mention the usury case at all. Which raises the question, was there something else going on that we don't know about? Did the church want him gone for some reason? Did personal grudges or hidden motives lead to the Bell's removal? Was the ghost story a distraction or something invented after the fact to explain this shame, scandal, and community tension? That's just something to think about. What do you think happened?
An easier way to make an apple pie would be to use the canned apples and already made pie crust. But I enjoyed making this. It was fun.
So, with everything that we've heard today, how are we going to make sense of this? Some skeptics say that this was a textbook poltergeist case. They point to a pattern seen in other famous hauntings, like in the Enfield poltergeist. If in these cases, the chaos tends to center around a teenage girl going through emotional and physical stress. In this case, the girl would have been Betsy Bell. Puberty, pressure, fear, trauma, those things can stir up a lot. And in deeply religious communities where mental health wasn't even talked about, and a girl had very little control over their own lives, this kind of stress could have shown up in very strange ways. Some believe that the physical manifestations, the bruises, the welts, the voices, they may have been a psychological or even self-inflicted, a cry for help in a time when girls weren't allowed to ask for it. Others think that it might have been mischief gone too far. Maybe one of the kids or someone in the community was behind it, and once the legend picked up steam, no one knew how to stop it. There's also the idea that it was a ghost story born out of gossip, tragedy, and time. Every community has one, and maybe this one just got kind of written down by the right person at the right time. Or maybe it wasn't any of that. Maybe something strange really did happen in that farmhouse in Tennessee. Something unexplainable. Either way, the Bell Witch story doesn't go away. I don't see it going away anytime soon. It sits at this strange intersection of memory, myth, and mystery, growing a little darker, a little weirder every time it's told. So, was it real? Or just a legend that learned how to breathe? That is for you to decide. So what do you guys think? Is the Bell Witch real or just like an over-dramatized tale? Tell me in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and do all the things so you know every time that I upload a new video. And if you want to know more about the witches, click here. I'm so glad they got vanilla ice cream on Yay. I kind of like sitting and talking about it.